If I can help somebody avoid what I've gone through, I'm willing to talk numbers. My grandmother always said, learn from the mistakes of others. You cannot possibly live long enough to make them all yourself. I went indie publishing in March 2019. My total income for that year was $637.41, and I'd spent more than that just on covers alone. I feel 100% that it's because of the new covers that I landed that featured deal. That ran on December 14th. And for the month of December total, my paid and free on the series was 55,648 units.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 173 of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In this episode, I have an interview with D.F. Hart, who's a Texas-based writer who loves to write and read when she's not putting her MBA with accounting concentration to use. Her favorite authors include Frederick Forsyth, Ken Follett, and J.D. Rubb. Other interests include hidden object and puzzle games. She loves a good mystery storyline. DeAnna writes as Faith Hart for her Another Try contemporary romance novels, and D.F. Hart for her thriller series Vital Secrets. And we have an in-depth conversation about her experience in writing and publishing, as well as a dramatic difference in sales when she stepped back and took these book covers she had, which were good, and updated them based on some advice she has. So she shares in-depth details and specific numbers, and I think it's a fantastic discussion, and that's coming up later in this episode. First, I wanted to get to some comments and personal updates from recent episodes. So I'm going to go way back in the comments because it's been a few episodes since I've touched them. Amy Tasakata commented on episode 169, The World Needs Your Book with Monica Leonel. And Amy said, thanks, Mark and Monica. It's so interesting to hear from someone who's been in the indie publishing business for so long. And thank you for that comment, Amy. And yeah, that is great. Monica has been around for a long time, shares some insights. And just a reminder, we're still in it for the long run. There's folks who've been in this from the beginning, like Monica. And even, as you'll hear in this interview, DeAnna, but there's so much longer for us to go. So that's really a good perspective to keep in mind. Now, Katie Mack commented on several episodes. I'm going to go back sequentially. So she commented on episode 162, Happy Accidents with Joshua Pantalaresco. And Katie said, I know I'm about 1 million years late. Well, several weeks anyway. That's so true. I feel that way too, Katie. I'm so behind on my podcast listening, especially in the last couple of weeks. Anyway, she says, late in responding to this podcast, but I thought that Josh got at a really important point. No matter how savvy and smart and driven to succeed an author is, in the end, what any of us is trying to do is cope with what happens when the painted veil of life lifts. And she says that's Percy Shelley's image, not mine. And we have to look beyond illusion. Thanks, Josh, for raising that, and thanks, Mark, for introducing me to his work. Well, thank you for that comment, Katie. I appreciate that. I love hearing the reflections that people have on things that happen in the episodes. Katie goes on, comments on episode 165, which was Rude Awakenings from Sleeping Rough, where I shared that from Peter Mitchell, the book that I'm publishing for my good friend, about his experience with homelessness in London, England. Katie said, just bought the book. Important work you're doing, Mark, on all fronts. Katie, thank you so much for buying the book. I really appreciate that. And it's not an easy read, but I hope you do enjoy the read. Peter is an absolutely brilliant writer, and it's a terrible situation that he's in. And Katie also commented on episode 170, the genre of Andrew Piper. And Katie says, I loved that Piper speaks of his writing projects as people who are who they are and will brook no nonsense about being crammed into a shape that they don't want to be. Good point. She also says, I also really agree with the idea of taking a bit of extra time to polish a piece so that it's the absolute best you can make it. There are a few things in this world as depressing as reading a book that could have been a contender. Well, I added the accent, not Katie. But which was posted before it was truly finished. And that's really good. I'm glad you picked up on that, Katie, because that is so true. We have the power, we have the ability to push all the buttons and publish all the things, but we need to take the time to make sure that it's the best thing that it can be, often working with a professional editor to make sure that it's just ready for prime time. So that's it for comments from recent episodes. You can comment on episodes over at starkreflections.ca. You can also at me at Twitter. I am at Mark Leslie. And as always, I love to hear the things that you are reflecting on. Now I'm about to read a word from this episode's sponsor, but before I get to that, I wanted to welcome new patron to the show. Welcome, Faye White. Faye White, thank you for becoming a patron, and you now have access to additional content that is available for patrons over at patreon.com/starkreflections. This is just one of the ways you can support the show and show your support for the show and gain access to additional content. Just this week, I posted actually this interview, the video of raw video of this interview to my patrons so they could get access to it early. This will be, probably by the time you hear this, the video will be available for everyone. And there is additional other content that will be made available for patrons of the show. So thank you to Faye, and thank you to all my patrons for what you do to support the show. That really shows that you appreciate the content and you appreciate getting access to additional content for the show. And I know it's not easy to throw those extra few dollars on top of all the other expenditures that people have, but it truly does mean a lot to me, and it continues to motivate me to know that there's people who appreciate the content. All right, let's get on to a word for this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is a platform that authors can use to get their audiobooks out into the market. If you're looking to work with a professional narrator, Findaway Voices has project managers who get assigned to your project to help you find, from among thousands of professionals around the world, the right voice for your audiobook. Instead of it being a completely DIY effort, they narrow it down to the top 5 or 10 narrators that they think would work best based on your parameters, and they offer you a range of pricing that these narrators charge. They even have flexible opportunities such as Voices Share, where you pay half of the regular rate and do a royalty split with the narrator. However, if you've already worked directly with a professional narrator, or you have the audiobook ready to go in a professional setting, you can use Findaway Voices for distribution, and you can choose exactly where you want that audiobook to be published and at what price, everywhere except Audible, where they kind of set the price, and Apple will adjust the price in some ways too. But for the most part, you're in control of the price with Findaway Voices. When you're looking for a narrator, you're in control, along with professionals from the industry to help you pick the best narrator. These are just two of the amazing things you can do as an author if you're looking to get into audiobooks. And if you want to learn how you can leverage Findaway Voices to your advantage, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And now for a bit of a personal update. I'm not sure if you can hear it in my voice, but got a little bit of something going on in my throat. I had a little bit of scratchy throat the last couple days, and I think it might have stemmed from the fact that normally I get between 5 and 6 hours of sleep on average most nights, and that's usually good. But I got just a little over 4, and that might have just been enough to put me under the weather. Now it's weird because I have not had a cold since, I guess, the pandemic, since the lockdown, because I'm not in airports every second week. and not, licking lampposts, licking doorknobs and all the things I normally do. I don't think I've licked a single doorknob in my life. But it's interesting. It's weird to catch a cold. Now, obviously, catching a cold and having, one of the symptoms from COVID is kind of a little bit of a terrifying thing. But so my voice is a little bit raw, so I'm going to kind of keep. Yeah, you're like, yay, he's going to keep the introduction short because his voice is wonky. I'm actually just in the process. I'm just doing this recording, and then I have to jump into a recording for a future episode or an interview future episode. And today I also did a live Draft Digital Live with Kevin Tumlinson. So I was like, oh boy, on a day I didn't want to talk much. I'm doing a lot of talking. So in terms of personal updates, I am thrilled and excited to share that my short story that I talked about on earlier episodes of this podcast, Death by Disco Vacuum in Space, Really Sucks. That is a short story that appears in Space 1975. And that has been edited by Robert Jeshonik. And I am thrilled to be in an anthology that includes stories from authors. You've heard on this podcast, Craig Martell and Blaise Ward, and Peter David, the first time I read a Peter David story was a Spider-Man comic book that he wrote. Mike Barron and Dean Wesley Smith. And so the cool thing about this anthology, which is just being released this week, is Barbara Bain, who starred in Space 1999, classic science fiction television program. She wrote the introduction, and Bob didn't tell any of us until he sent us the proofs a couple weeks ago, just so we can verify and validate. And so I had a lot of fun with Death by Disco Vacuum in Space. Really Sucks, because it was dark humor. And a bunch of us, it was a Patreon project, and a bunch of us were committed to killing certain people. So patrons who said, hey, I want to get killed in a story. And Michael Lucas, who has been a guest on this podcast, a brilliant writer who I know through some writing groups, I picked him, and we joked on Facebook about getting killed by a disco vacuum. Or something like that. So I was like, okay, so space is a vacuum, so there's a joke there. But I actually used a vacuum cleaner. And because of the 70s, there's this beautiful art, and my apologies, I have to figure out who the artist is. This beautiful artwork, because the homicidal maniac who's raging on a space station in my story, they're dressed in 70s garb, and he's dressed as Elvis, Vegas Elvis. So it was this beautiful shot of him with the big sunglasses and the Elvis hair and the cape, the Vegas cape and jumpsuit and the laser gun. And it's just an amazing piece of art. And I had so much fun killing Michael in the story. And it was hilarious because he obviously, patrons got this early. And I just got this comment from him that said, oh my God, you know what? And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? Because I do all kinds of silly things. And I was like, oh my God, he must have read the story, because I didn't tell him how I was going to do it. But it had to involve, the paneling, the wood paneling from the 70s. It involves a vacuum. And one of the things I'm really, really thrilled about, and I had a lot of fun with my creativity here, is I worked so many 70s references into it. So obviously, as the story opens up, I talk about the Bee Gees, "Staying Alive" is playing in the background, and so there's a lot of music from that time period. But there's quotes from the 70s, from movies, from TV shows, from not from songs, because it's hard to quote songs. Although there is a beautiful accompaniment where I applied the use of a song in the story as the psychopathic killer is killing people on this space station. And it was funny because I was doing that as a sort of Easter egg and a trope, but the actual quotes from classic movies ends up becoming something that my main character ends up using, which I know it's only a short story, but it's been a long time since I've actually written something that I would call science fiction, and I can't say I've ever written and published a story set in space. So that was a first for me. Now I have set things on foreign planets, but I don't think they've been published yet. And so this was a great experience, and I'm really excited. And Bob's a great writer. It was great to work with him as an editor, and so that's Space 1975. So that's for the personal update. That's kind of I'm just going to stick with that because I've babbled on for way too long, as I often do. But hey, that's just kind of the way I roll. But why don't we get on to this fascinating conversation with DeAnna Hart, or DF Hart. DeAnna, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so thrilled to have you here. So let's let listeners know a little bit about your background. Maybe the names you write under, when you got into writing.
Sure. I actually write in two genres. I write mystery thriller as DF Hart because I've never found my given name to be particularly mysterious or suspenseful. And then when I got into the romance side of the world, I thought my middle name would be perfect. So those are under Faith Hart.
Very appropriate.
Right. I actually wrote my first book back in 2010. Went through what I now, have learned since then was a vanity press, and obviously, exited stage left from that situation. But I carried that first book around in my head for about 20 years before I actually got it onto paper. And the motivating factor.
Wait, 20 years before 2010?
Yeah, I actually had the idea for the first book back in 1989. And it wasn't until my 40th birthday that I decided, well, I probably ought to get cracking and get that out of my head and onto the page. Anyway, long, convoluted story. But so I actually wrote my first book back in 2010, but it didn't go anywhere or do a whole lot until 2018. I actually switched gears and started being independently published in March of 2019. So I'm coming up on my 2-year anniversary of making that leap. Yeah.
Wow. Well, happy anniversary. So let's go back to that. So you said 2010, you ended up using a vanity press.
Mm-hmm.
Did you manage to get the rights back to that book? Is that something that you re-released?
I did.
Okay.
That book was originally titled, And the Wall Came Down. It was rebranded in March of 2019, and it is Wall of Secrets, which started off as book one of the series, which has now been moved to the prequel because that book is more historical fiction, and it really didn't. The funnel, as our audience will know what I'm talking about there, our funnel to the rest of the series. The rest of the series was set in modern day. So I opted to take that book one and just kind of make it the prequel or the backstory for the series.
So that's really fascinating. I want to think about, so you've had the concept for the novel in your head for 20 years. And then that over time expanded into this series. Was it always a series in your mind, or was it just you had to get this idea out first?
Yeah, I got the idea out onto paper, and like I said, I first published that in 2010, and it was about 2018. I thought, I left some good loose ends at the end of that one, and I want to wrap those up, and so I did, and people seemed to like them, so I just kept going.
So what is the premise, like your elevator pitch for the series, or one of the first books in the series, maybe?
The Vital Secret series follows FBI profiler Nathan Thomas and his team as they navigate cases, catching bad guys, battling and capturing serial killers. But it's a very family oriented series in the respect that, Nathan is, up all night trying to figure out the profiler on the serial killer that we're trying to catch. And then he has to go home and take turns helping out with Charlie because Charlie's colicky. So my readers have expressed that it's a very balanced series about not just an FBI profiler and law enforcement people doing what they do, but they've also got this whole personal life outside of the scope of their work. And sometimes it gets very interesting trying to juggle. I do have friends and family that are in and have been in law enforcement, so I thought it was important to just to show that 360-degree view. It wasn't actually an intention of mine. It's just the way I wound up writing it, but it seems to resonate with readers. So.
So that was an element. So you had this idea that you were walking around with for a couple decades. You didn't even have that personal life. That just happened as you were developing the character.
The idea that I carried around for 20 years, I was a freshman in college and I was watching the dismantling of the Berlin Wall back in 1989.
Okay.
And I thought, how cool would it be if somebody had stuck like secret Nazi manifesto documents in the wall and then went back and got them when the wall came down and came to
Oh.
America. So that's the what is now the prequel of the series is actually about
Oh, and that's the
yes.
historical. You call it historical, and when I think historical, I'm thinking like, hey, I was around for that too. I remember it well. You call it historical. I think you're talking about like Civil
No, no,
War
no,
or
no, no.
something.
So yeah, so the prequel actually begins in 1961 when the right before the Berlin Wall is erected. Because I don't know how many people know about
Okay.
this, but from the end of World War II until 1960, Berlin was unified, and so Germany as a whole was still unified, but separated into separate sectors, but not with hard borders between them. It wasn't until 1961 that the Berlin Wall was erected. So the actual initial seed of the series idea was you've got a good guy who's trapped in East Berlin. You've got this kid that's in one of his college classes. They clash, and the kid is actually the one who is the one. He's the ardent Nazi, and he comes to America. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens, but that was the original vehicle for the idea. And then as I kept writing, I'm in modern day, and just decided that that initial book of mine would be a better vehicle if it was a prequel and not the kickoff in series because it's the only one set from so long ago through present day. All the rest of the stuff is present day. So,
Wow. This
yeah,
is, you know what? This is that's phenomenal. Like actually, just because I was around for the that was a significant moment in modern
huge,
history.
huge.
There's like, oh, I got to pick this up now. But it's as I understand that prequel is that free?
It is free. It's not. I've pulled it down. It's not for sale, available anywhere. The only
Oh, how do people get
They
it?
sign up for my newsletter.
And then they get it for
And then
free.
they get it for free, and they also get a supplemental thing called Cast of Characters, where I go into a little bit more detail about each main character as they appear in the series. There's, some characters haven't made it all the way into the book 5 that I'm writing now, but there are no spoilers in my cast of characters because
Cool.
that wouldn't be very sporting of me,
And so
would
and
it?
so dies in book 2.
Yeah, no, that you got to read them to find that out.
Oh,
So,
that's also okay. Before I forget, I'm going to ask you at the end again. But where can people find your newsletter to sign up for it?
if you go to www.twoofhearts.com, it's the number 2
Two
of and then
hearts.
hearts, HARTS.com. There'll be a little pop up box that comes up and plug your information in there. And yeah, let me send you your free prequel to my series and the free supplement.
Now I have to ask this because I thought this when you shared your website with me when we were talking, I think last week or so.
Uh huh.
Is Two of Hearts because you have two pseudonyms that you use Heart with, or is it like I'm curious as to the play on words there? I
But
understand the card reference, of course.
yeah, I didn't start actually writing romance stuff until spring of 2020.
Oh,
So
it's
when
that
I
new. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So when I did the website, it was Heart's my last name, and I just thought, Two of Hearts like the playing card. If people buy paperbacks of mine, they actually have a little Two of Hearts playing card as part of my logo for my yeah.
Oh my God, that is so cool. I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, the whole two pen name thing happened that was subsequent to the website construction. So
So, is your romance? Is it romantic suspense? So, is there sort of connected to the first genre?
contemporary romance.
Okay.
They're all standalone books. They're all novella length. What actually started the romance thing when I had a supplemental character in book 3 of my Vital Secret series, and I put her through the ringer. I felt so bad for Maddie, and I wanted her to have a happy ending, and so I thought, well, I'm just going to write her one. And then I thought, okay, probably my suspense people aren't going to translate over well to romance. So I wanted to keep the two pen names separate. So that's how writing His Faith Hart came to be. Was I
Oh
felt
my God,
sorry.
that is so cool because you
Yeah,
cared so much about a character. You felt bad for you. It's like,
I
oh my
really
God, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I really did. I felt bad for her because I wrote her. I just put her through a lot in List of Secrets. so so
Oh
I
my
yeah, I
God,
gave her
wow.
own happily ever after, and then so that became. I actually have a total of 7 books. The last 2 are coming out. One this month, one next month. And that's it for the another try novellas. And then book 7 in that series is actually a deeper look at how Faith and Rick came together and met, and there are two of the main characters in Vital Secret series. So
So this is kind of neat because it's for readers who love the suspense, but also maybe want a romance story. I mean, I think of an author like Marie Force with her a Fatal series that
mm,
she publishes, which are suspense romance together. So you get the FBI stuff, and then you get the love. So you get
yeah,
both. But so you have two names that can kind of satisfy both, especially if they want to explore the rest of the universe, right?
yeah. I would say of the seven romance books I've got, only two of them I would really classify as romantic suspense. But yes, there are explosions and bad guys chasing people, and yeah, and those two books actually happen to be interconnected. Um, the and the romance series is a little bit frustrating for me in hindsight because even though the numbering sequence doesn't mean they have to be read in that order, they're
Yeah,
just
because
the order
they're
they
all
were written in.
standalone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But books 4 and 5 in that series are interconnected. They are actually two sides of one situation. It's about two roommates, Leah and Shannon. Um, Shannon finds herself in a very dangerous situation and she has to be taken into protective custody. Leah, her protective roommate, insists on going with her. So, book 4, Love Notes, is Shannon's journey and how her and Pete get together through all this, trying not to get killed. And then book 5, Read My Lips, is Leah, her roommate's story, and her connecting with Larry, the FBI agent.
Cool.
So they're interconnected together. It's best to read those two back to back. Yeah.
Right. Oh
Yeah.
wow,
So
that is kind of cool.
I
So
I make stuff very complicated
well,
sometimes. I
but you
don't
know
mean to.
what? But they're Easter eggs for readers. It's like people
Uh-huh.
who, have binged everything and can't wait. The next one's not coming out for 2 months. What do I do? There's another thing I can enjoy. Like
Yeah.
there's a little rabbit hole I can go down for a little while. Thank you.
Yeah, and on my BookBub profile and on my Goodreads profiles, I do, on the DF Hart profiles, I do mention that I also write as.
Oh, good. Yeah, that
So
way
I've
if
got
there
they've got
are
that.
if yeah, because there are lots of
There are some
diehard,
folks that will
yeah.
cross over. Yeah,
Yeah, who
yeah,
just love reading and they'll jump from genre to genre and stuff. So
yeah,
so the reason I was eager to talk about your suspense and then your romance is because I think it was working on as trying to build up your professional repertoire and understanding more about how to sell that
right.
led to on your romance books that actually led to a huge difference in your writing career that happened only just a few months ago.
Yeah,
Can you walk through? I'd like
absolutely.
to let's start with the frustrating story, and let's move on to the happy ending. So that we're
Okay.
just, I'm mean, spoiler alert, happy ending is coming. So this is almost like
Yes.
romance, this interview.
Oh. Well, let's see. Like I said, I went indie publishing March of 2019, and I will be the first to admit I had no clue what I was doing. I,
Right,
I had no clue about marketing. Um, I'd never even heard of the idea of of setting up a newsletter subscriber thingy, much less having one in place. I mean, I did a lot of stuff wonky and out of order. Let's just get that disclaimer out in big bold letters right now. Um, so I almost feel like the success to this point is like almost in spite of myself. you know
yeah,
but what had happened was I had my first book out. I put two more out and then realized that I wasn't funneling properly. Like I said, the first book was lending itself more to historical thriller readers, and my audience is actually a bigger that's a very niche
right,
area. And so since the rest of my stuff was set in modern day, I felt like I was getting a lot of drop off in reads because this stuff isn't historical, the stuff that comes after this
right.
book here. So I diversified that. I was happy with my covers. They were really pretty. I thought they were doing well. And so at that point, it was for most of 2020. I'd say it's probably late September. Sorry, late August, early September. My numbers were just kind of creeping along. I wasn't I knew I was missing something, but I didn't know what. For comparison, and because if I can help somebody avoid what I've gone through, I'm willing to talk numbers. My grandmother always said, learn from the mistakes of others. You cannot possibly live long enough to make them all yourself. So, in the interest of helping people learn from the mistakes of others, I went indie publishing in March 2019. My total income for that year was $637.41, and I'd spent more than that just on covers alone. So,
Right.
yikes. Great on a tax return as far as deduction standpoint, not so much from a paying your bills standpoint. And so 2020 came, and at that point, the romance bug had bitten me from writing Maddie's story. And I thought, okay, so I got the first 3 or 4 books out, and they just weren't doing what I needed them to do. And so finally, in frustration, seeing the income numbers creep along about the same level as the year before, I booked a consult with Craig over at Hidden Gems. I don't know how many people know this, but Hidden Gems, they don't just do the review thing. They do blog, they blog, and they do a specific romance newsletter, but they also do, like, let's look at your covers, let's do some consulting and see kind of where your business can be shored up a little bit. And I was struggling so mightily with the romance stuff that I booked a consult with Craig, and we covered the romance stuff. And he said, now you've got thrillers out too, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, more in series, that's a longer, I said, yeah. And he said, so there's more data on those. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, let's take a look at those. And I immediately was hesitant. I don't want to, I'm worried about the romance stuff. The
Right.
thrillers
Yeah.
will take off at some point, I'm sure. Clueless. This is what Clueless looks like. And he goes, just trust me. Just let's just take a peek at your thrillers. And the moment that we drilled down, he said, it's your covers. Your covers don't say thriller series. He said, don't get me wrong, they're beautiful. They're just not. They're not doing it for you. And I was a little resistant to making change. One, because I'm very mule-headed, and I'm Texan, so that's part of it.
Well, you'd spent a lot already.
I really had, and at that point, I was like, okay, I've got not enough money coming in to break even, much less do what I need to do to get romance off the ground, and so I was having to be very picky and choosy. But once I kind of stepped back and I looked at it objectively, I realized he was 100% right. My covers, while they were pretty, just weren't, they needed to be dialed in. So I took a deep breath and I crunched some numbers and said, okay, if I want the series that I've invested the most time, money, and effort into at this point, then I need to make that change. So I looked at top 100 lists across all storefronts. All my stuff is wide, by the way.
Yeah.
I looked at some of the newsletter promo, like book funnel promos that I'd been in, and I looked at some of the covers in there that I thought were really kind of pinging the genre that I was looking for. And so went online, shopped around, found a designer who's very strong in mystery thriller, and said, this is my series, and here's a blurb about each book. And then I got out of his way and let him do his thing. And he worked quickly, and he was very cost effective and
Can
very.
you mention who it was so we can share a link in the show notes?
His name is Adrigus, and his website is rockingbookcovers.com. He is in Ireland, so and it just extremely, extremely talented individual, and very very supportive of the mission that you're trying to accomplish with your work.
Right.
Understands the nuances and the subtleties, asks the right questions, and really just kind of embraces your vision and as his own, and just does a phenomenal job. I can't possibly highly recommend him highly enough. So then we get to and for context coming up, I had run some paid promotions in April and in September with the old covers. I ran Fussy Librarian, I ran Free Booksy Series, and they went okay for what I thought at the time was okay. I mean, I made my money back, but that was about it. The new covers launched live across all retailers on October 10th. And over Halloween weekend, I ran those same promos again because I wanted to beta test and see how the new covers did.
Okay.
So I did the same promotions, Fussy Librarian, Free Booksy Series. In April promos, I topped out at about 167 units paid and free for the series for the month. In October, after the new covers hit, I did 7,587 units paid and free for October, and another 5,405 for November.
Whoa. So that's not just an incremental, like, oh, I increased by 10%.
Yeah, that's blown out, actually.
Yeah.
That's yeah. I did not do the percentage of improvement, but I was just like, wow.
It's more than
So
100%, I'm thinking.
oh yeah.
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 I'm
I'm
not good
thinking
at
so.
math in my head, but I can do that much.
Yeah. I'm thinking it's better than 100%. So yeah. But the other big thing that the revamping those covers did for me, other than, get that big push of visibility. So I was seeing a steady increase in activity across all storefronts, but Apple took off like a bullet for me
Really?
after I did the new covers. Yeah. And I'd been applying all year long. It became kind of a joke that, I've got to go apply for my 30-day, rejection letter from BookBub for a featured deal. And so right after the books were recovered, November 9th is when my 30 days was up so I could apply again.
Right.
So I applied again with my free first in series for the thriller side for a BBFD. And then that weekend, my husband and I went on our anniversary trip, and I got an email on that anniversary trip that said, "Congratulations, you've been accepted for a BookBub feature deal," which I squealed, and I'm sure everybody in the campsite could probably hear me. Um, but because I feel 100% that it's because of the new covers that I landed that book feature deal, and it was U.S. and international. Like I said, for my free first in series, that ran on December 14th. And for the month of December total, my paid and free on the series was 55,648 units.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's just December
Yeah.
alone.
That's just December alone. Yeah. Um, I went from about 34 ratings on Amazon to right now I've got over 240 on Book One. Um, Before the book featured deal, I had about 30 ratings on Apple. That's up to 166. I'm very pleased to report that the average of the ratings has stayed in the 4 to 4.3 range, and the buy through so far has been
Wow.
pretty good. Yeah.
So wait a second. Were you saying there was an entire year where your total income from your books was 600 and change?
$637.41. Yeah.
Sounds to me almost like 1 week in December might have been better than that,
Um, I-
roughly. Or
December 2020 was my first four-figure month as an author. Yeah. And the total for the year was almost five times my income from 2019. I made almost
wow.
$3,200, and a good third of that was in December from that.
A third, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I think, I want to look back and sort of analyze. So you got the book bub from the new covers, but you probably also got some reviews from the Free Book Scene and Fussy Librarian,
Mhm.
I'm guessing. There must have been some follow-up where people reviewed it, and then that also probably.
I believe so. Yes. Yeah. So,
Wow, wow.
yeah.
And so you're seeing read through now. You're seeing
Yep.
people get book one,
Yeah.
and then maybe they sign up for your newsletter. They get a free book, right? Because I guess there's two paths they can go. They can just keep
Right.
reading, or they can also sign up for your newsletter to get something they can't get
Yep.
any otherwise. Have you seen an
I
uptick
have.
in your
I
newsletter
have
signups as well?
my uptick in newsletter signups, uptick in BookBub followers. So, yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good. That is really good. Yeah, because then when you have any new release, there's going to be automatic
Yep.
notifications
Yep.
from BookBub.
I've seen an uptick in pre-orders also. Right now I've got Book List Path and Web are out. Carnival Secrets comes out April 30th. Before the BookBub, I had two orders on Amazon and one on Apple. I've now got 13 on each platform. Of course, I can't.
Oh,
Of
that's
course, I can't
fantastic.
see Kobo and Google. So I probably ought
Right.
to tell everybody I get my books to Apple and Barnes and Noble through Drafted Digital, and Drafted Digital is really good about reporting the pre-orders that
The
yeah.
pre-order
So
numbers. And then I think you can probably, as long as you don't abuse the privilege, you can email the Kobo Writing Life team and say, "Hi, can I just check in on my
yeah,
pre-order
because I
numbers?"
am curious to see how those. Because I didn't do that ahead of time, I have no way of knowing if there were any in place before, but I'm
Right.
really curious to know if there are any now. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. So, and we're what, a week and a bit, a week and change into
Yes,
2021. Has the trend continued in a relatively positive direction, or has it reset back to
it has not
trickle?
reset back to trickle. Through yesterday, because all of these, obviously, not all the storefronts are reporting yesterday's activity yet, but through yesterday,
Right.
I've already made 66% of the income that I made in 2019, 9 days into the year. I'm at 400. Yeah,
Nine days into the year, you're at
I'm at
66%.
425 bucks, almost 426 bucks. 9 days in.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is phenomenal. And so it sounds to me like you're a numbers person, that you love to crunch numbers, that you kind of like spreadsheets, and because obviously you're measuring what you're doing. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about the importance of understanding where your
Mm.
income is compared to what you're spending on marketing, etc.?
It is so vitally crucial. Um, I'm wired a little bit left and right brained. I actually have an MBA with accounting concentration. I am an accountant.
That explains it.
I'm an accountant by day. I've been doing that for 25
Okay.
years. It's not my passion, but I like it. I'm good at it. I actually, when I was growing up, wanted to be a college professor who taught Shakespeare and was a writer in her off time. So I got,
Oh wow.
I'm now at the point where I've got half that dream going as far as the writing standpoint. But yes, it is. You are shouting into an abyss if you just willy nilly spend money on promos and ads, or especially um, cost per click ads can get really out of hand very quickly unless you've really got them dialed in. But all that spend avails you nothing if you're not looking at the data that comes out of it. Um, Checking your numbers, even on a monthly basis, is better than nothing, but it enables you to get ahead of maybe some trending that's going on, and it enables you to course correct if you see things that are not going in a direction that you expected.
Right.
It also a lot of times will flag or identify some things that maybe are going on that you're not aware of. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say that somebody reads your book, they love your book, and they happen to be a blogger, and you wind up getting 300 or 500 or 1,000 or more, whatever downloads of your book, and you haven't run any ad spend. It's in your best interest to try to find out where that comes from, because those kinds of things will affect your visibility. And if you've got that kind of stuff going on, then it lessens, quite frankly, in my opinion, it lessens the amount that you have to spend out of pocket to get the word out about your books, because somebody else is already helping you with that.
Right.
So, but if you don't look at your data, and you don't go, okay, well, I ran this promotion to run from this week to this week. Okay, but 3 days before I had a spike in downloads. If you don't know that, maybe that has you spending the max that you've allotted to spend when you maybe could have backed that off a little bit and saved that budget, save that ad budget for maybe the following month or for your other book or for your other series. So you have got to be able to maintain a pulse on your business. This is just like any other business. If you were a manufacturer of, pick a product, let's say I make roller skates. It's going to behoove you to know how well your roller skates are doing out in the market.
Right.
And being an author, being a self-published author is no different. You've got to keep your finger on the pulse of your business. So
Cool. Wow. That is
yeah.
amazing. So as I look at where you are in early 2021, things on a pretty decent
So
trajectory.
far, so far.
And then I want to go back and talk to two different versions of DeAnna. I want to go back to
Mm,
the DeAnna in 2019 or 2010,
mm.
who had used a vanity press and probably was not the best experience. But then also the DeAnna who at the end of well, let's start with that, and then there's a second question I have for a different point in your writer journey. What would you go
Okay.
back and tell this DeAnna who went with this vanity publishing outfit? Went, oh, I don't know what's going on here. What am I going to do now? What would you tell her?
Do your research before you commit to anything. Self-publishing was actually available as a vehicle back then. It's amazing the stuff when we look back and say, I didn't know what I didn't know. But
Right,
that's a big one. And I want to stress the importance of this to your audience. Vanity presses feed on ignorance. They feed on it. They actually actively target people who are not aware that for a fraction of what it costs to go with a vanity press, you can do this yourself. I'm not saying everything. I, for example, cannot draw my way out of a paper bag. I would never presume I would never presume to claim that. So I knew once I realized that, wow, I could have saved myself a ton of money if I'd back in 2010. Not only that, but I would have retained full rights over my material the whole time. And I would have had a more direct impact on being able to edit or tweak my work as needed, because among other things, when you sign up with the Vanity Press, any changes that you want to make to your document, you've got to run through them. You've got to give them your changes, wait for them to fix it, wait for them to upload to all the retailers. Okay. So it's not as instantaneous as it is in self-pub. When you say, oh, this says, she went to store instead of she went to the store, I need to fix that. And you can fix it and upload it to your retailers. And within 48 hours, the new version's out in the world. With Vanity Press, it doesn't work like that. So
they may also charge you for that update too. In some cases.
If I have the kind of year that I hope to this year, I will eventually recoup what I lost going with Vanity Press.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it at that.
It was not an insignificant amount of money, which is why they make billions of dollars a year.
Yes.
Preying on authors,
Yes.
which is probably that's kind of the business practice.
I think the total that I wound up spending with them was a little over $4,000. I was just about to say, I actually count myself very blessed that I wised up when I did and got out when I did. I've heard of authors who have been basically, quite frankly, taken for a lot more.
Right.
But it also still stings a little bit because for $4,000, I could have put 2 audiobooks out.
Yeah.
But live and learn. And I learned things from 2010 to 2018 that served me well when I first got started doing this myself. Having said that, I'll be the first one to admit that if I had it to do over again, I probably would have done a couple things differently. I actually wrote an article for that. About that for Kobo Life, Writing Life, talking about what I wish I'd known when I began self-publishing. And among them would have been, I don't think I would have tethered the historical fiction to, and I don't think I would have had that be the first in that series. I would have structured that a little bit differently, because it caused me a bunch of gyrations later to go unwind that and make it right.
Cool. Well, we'll include a link to that article on Kobo Writing Life blog so people can check it out. The other thing I want to ask, so I'm thrilled with how well things have gone since October when you made the cover change, and all the readers who are now fortunate enough to have the pleasure of reading your novels. Which is you win and they win, right? It's because they wouldn't have won otherwise. They may have taken a pass because they didn't grab it, right?
Because the covers just weren't hitting the proper marks. But I'll tell you this, I'm especially through December when the numbers got, I had more movement on my work in December of 2019 or December of 2020 than I did from March 2019 to November 2020 on Amazon. Wow. I moved more units on Amazon in 1 month than I had in my whole career to date. Now, my career is not that lengthy, but I still I'm very, very humbled by that.
Well, but it's
very
also
thankful for that.
It's also technically 10 years.
Yeah, technically
it is. No, I mean, it's not like you just started last year. Right. You learned a lot of things along the way. So the other thing I want to say is I'm thrilled with where you are now, but I suspect there may be listeners to this podcast who hear that in 2019 you made $636 US, because that's a lot more than Canadian. and there are probably authors who go, oh my God, I would die to crack $500 a year. And I'm not making fun at all, because we've all been there. But what I'm curious is, thinking back to those days and to now, What advice would you give other authors who are like, wow, I cracked $500 this year. I'm pretty pleased with it. And that's a great place to be, because I think most authors will not even have hit $500 in a year, considering the overall industry stats. What sort of advice would you offer to authors who are sitting in that, where $500 a year is a pretty phenomenal hit?
The first and single biggest thing I would say is celebrate your successes. Every single one of them matters. Um, a lot of times, I think we hear other authors talk about, especially when it comes to revenue, and maybe we get a little bit of comparisonitis going, which isn't healthy. You can only control what you can control. If you make your books the most tight, solid writing that you possibly can, get the best covers that you possibly can that are genre appropriate. Make sure your work is edited, because readers will stay away from your subsequent works if you've got a poorly edited first work. That's a big one. But celebrate each milestone. There's not a single indie author that I can think of ever that has had a first book hit, make $1 million. I mean, that's those just don't happen. That's really similar to, you hear about this great new band that's hit number one in the Billboard charts. Well, good on them. But what people don't realize is that they did, they toured club gigs for 15 years before they had that hit single. And it's the
Right.
same thing here. You need to allow yourself some grace. You need to understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You need to celebrate each of your milestones. And if you keep those things in mind, and you also say, okay, you need to set some SMART goals. I think hopefully everybody's heard about the acronym for SMART goals. And I don't remember, because I don't remember exactly what the acronym means, but at this moment, but basically it's set manageable goals for yourself. It's not really realistic to be in your first year as a writer or with 2 books out and say, I want to make $100,000 this year. Lofty, but maybe not realistic. Understand and remember that, you know, each step along the path that you take, even though you seem like, or maybe you're frustrated because the path isn't moving as fast as you want it to, but guess what? You're still making progress, right? So
Right.
set yourself goals that are manageable, achievable. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Um, but that was the, it wasn't until I sat down and looked at some of these numbers and I went, wow, I've really come a long way since 2019. But it took that look back to see it. So,
Right.
every sale, celebrate every sale you make, celebrate every good review you get, celebrate every, hey, I got 20 new subscribers this week. Well, that's 20 possible future super fans of your work, you know? So celebrate the small things, because the small things over time add up to some really, really awesome big things in the big picture.
That is phenomenal advice, because I mean, every single download or sale of a book is another reader somewhere that's discovering your work, and
Mhm.
that can be something that carries for the rest of their reading life
Right.
and your writing life, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Deanna, thank you so much. That's a great way to end this conversation. Can you please let listeners know where they can find out more about you online, and check everything out? The all of the hearts that you're
All
involved
of
in.
the hearts. www.twoofhearts.com. That's the number 2 of, and then hearts, HARTS. I will warn you that I've been a bit lackadaisical. The romance page on the site needs to be updated. I believe the suspense thriller page is updated, but I've got retailer links in there. If you prefer to buy direct from the website, I do have links up for the books, most of the books anyway, in my website store as well. Um, so that's on my to-do list, is to finish getting that romance page on the store updated with the, because I also wound up recovering the romance books, and I haven't done the marketing push with them yet, but that's about to happen. So fingers crossed that that goes well. Um, I love engaging with my readers. So if you want to drop me a line, there's a contact form on the website, and or if you want to sign up for the newsletter, I send out 2 newsletters a month. One is sales and promo activity, and one is a hey, how's you doing? Hope everything's well in this crazy world, and here's what I'm up to lately. But readers can email me anytime. I try my best to answer within a 2 or 3 day period. I don't like to keep people waiting. I think it's rude. So, you know, if you feel like saying hey, reach out. My email address is dfhart@twoofhearts.com. Pretty easy to remember. And I look forward to interacting with more of you guys. And I hope my telling my story was helpful.
It was helpful to me, and I know it will be helpful to my listeners. DeAnna, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Yeah, thank you. Not a problem. Bye.
Before I do my post-interview reflection, I want to share an update that DeAnna sent to me just a few minutes ago. So it's the evening of what is today, the 14th of January. And DeAnna has sales up to the 13th on her various dashboards. And as of the 13th of January, she's at over $500 in sales revenue for the month of January. And her pre-orders for that next title she talked about are at 35. So this is phenomenal. And I think about it's not even like the 13th, 13 days into January is almost just close to what she made in an entire year in 2019. And that's a story of hope, especially for those of you who may be struggling and floundering and thinking, wow, I haven't cracked 100 or whatever. And that's the reality for most people. We tend to only hear the stories of the people that are making a lot of money. I know for a fact that there's a lot of people who would be happy to sell a dozen books. Based on, this is looking at understanding and having access to all of the industry stats. So that's an important thing to remember if you're struggling. And it kind of ties into the reflection that I wanted to make. So DeAnna basically said, she made 600 and change that first year. She spent way more on covers alone. It didn't incorporate any of the other expenses. So she was operating at a significant loss. Prior to that, she spent thousands of dollars on vanity press. That was 10 years earlier. So, you've got a full decade of 20 years of having the book in her head. Then it gets published. Then another 10 years before she kind of takes back the rights and does her own thing with it after learning and learning and learning. And then she had the series, the thriller series, and she paid for covers already. She'd already invested in covers. And then she had a consult with Craig from Hidden Gems. And ironically, I love this, that it was, to look at the romance covers, but he wanted more data. He thought that, there's more that we can look at. And on a whim, they said, let's take a look at your thrillers. And he dramatically changed her perspective. And then, of course, he asked her to face something really difficult, which was, you need new covers. They're great covers. They're good covers. They look good, but they don't look good for the market. And he helped her. And not only did he help her, but he shared that perspective with her. But she had to do the really, really hard thing of going back and thinking, wow, I already spent all this money on covers. So instead of falling under the confirmation bias that so many people fall into, where I couldn't possibly have made a mistake or be wrong, she took an analytical look at it, probably, thanks to her MBA background, but she took an analytical look at things and realized that she had to invest again. And that has made all the difference. 2 roads diverted in a wooded path, sort of. But that was a significant change for her. And I'm so thrilled and so happy to see that, because, imagine she's carried this story around for 20 years that evolved into this series, that evolved into a romance series. She has all these great stories to share. And now there's readers out there that are actually enjoying them. And she's reaping the fruits of all of those labors. But remember, She didn't do this overnight. It was through trial and error, and she shares her numbers, she shares her pain, she shares the mistakes in order to help us, understand by learning through her mistakes. So, DeAnna, thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to do that sharing. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast. If you like the podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend that you think would find value in these reflections. You can also leave a review at the podcatcher of your choice. Again, thanks for listening. This is Mark Leslie Lefebvre. So until next week and next episode, this is Mark wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.